Until Freedom Comes, which is a comprehensive toolkit about bailouts. We have a dope lineup for folks tonight, including folks who have done bailouts and many of the co-authors of the toolkit, to both talk folks through what's in the toolkit. We know that it's big and massive, and to encourage folks to throw down. So I'm going to pass it on to Mary Hook to get us started.
There we go. Good evening, friends. I hope everyone is well. Just wanted to take a minute so folks know why you got on the call. And if the objectives don't fit, you probably clicked on the wrong link. But now that you're here, you might as well stay. So let's jam out. So one, we want to be able to, again, as Marbury said, run through the toolkit and kind of break it down a little bit so folks that are interested and want to throw down for Mother's Day, there's an invitation to bring folks closer into that work and be able to get prepared and start building out the infrastructure you need to throw down from Black Mama's Day, the Black Mama's Day bailout. And we also want to make sure that folks know what's happening politically. We know that the bailouts are a tactic. And so this is an opportunity to move a longer term strategy to end money bail. And so this is an opportunity to get updated on how some of the policy fights is working, because we're moving a three-pronged strategy, if you will, to engage in political education. Some of you all may have seen the Transformative Bail Reform Toolkit that came out last year that this body of folk and some other brilliant people helped put together. So the public education, political education, the direct action and the community mobilization around not just Mama's Day, but the other bailouts that have happened since Mama's Day, right? Black August Day bailout, Father's Day bailout, Juneteenth, just because. And then also, again, the policy interventions. And we know that there are comrades that are moving out on the local tip as well as on the statewide level. So, we want folks to be invited to participate in all three of those. But this call, we're going to talk about the bailouts and how folks can, engage in longer term work. So I think that's about it. And I'm going to kick it over to Arissa.
Thanks, Mary. So I'm going to briefly tell you a bit about who National Bailout is and what we have done. So in January of 2017, Black organizers from across the country came together to convene and to strategize on ways to disrupt the pretrial and money bail system that unfortunately disproportionately impacts Black communities. What left that convening was the formation, or what came from that convening was the formation of National Bailout, which is a collective of Black organizers across the U.S. Representing about over a dozen organizations and base building groups in the U.S. That are committed to building a community-based movement, to end money bail, in pretrial detention, and ultimately in mass incarceration, while being intentional about building community with our folks. And the first action that came from that was proposed by Mary Hooks from Southern Zone New Ground, who just spoke to y'all, and that was Black Mama's Bailout. And Mary Hooks has told us, and when offering that dope ass action to us, was very intentional about letting us know that this was rooted in the Black liberation tradition, that this was something that our ancestors has done with freeing themselves and one another into abolition cane. So the National Bailout Collective is very much rooted in that ancestral tradition, and we are going to keep freeing ourselves and one another until we all free, until we don't have anything to be free from. And collectively, we've been doing very dope work together. As Mary mentioned, we did the popular education resource, which was the Transformative Bail curriculum, with a few community partners. Since May of 2017, we bailed out over 200 people. We have done teach-ins and community trainings in all of our communities. And we have we've held our folks who come home with providing supportive services and just alternative models to the system. And as y'all have seen, and as you'll see when looking through this toolkit is very much also in a tradition of Black liberation. But we recognize, as we believe that Black liberation will help free all of us. But we recognize that, folks will be wanting to utilize this toolkit to free people outside of the Black community, and we invite folks to do that, as we know that this system impacts us all and harms us all as well. So that's a little bit about who we are and what we have done. I'm going to take folks briefly, if you are looking at this toolkit on page 11, which is the overview and checklist. So I'm going to briefly go through that and pass it back to Mary. So this overview and checklist is basically some basic steps that we are recommending based on the experiences of these dope organizers on this call, on this webinar, and beyond that have participated in this bailouts. We recognize that a lot of technical steps go into this process, but we want to stress that it's important to articulate your goals and visions, as this will help inform this process that I'm about to walk through. I also want to note that this timeline is contingent upon like where you are, your different guidelines and laws, because bail varies very differently according to location. So this could take up to from a few weeks to a few months. So it's important to do your research, which I'll speak a little bit more about that as we go through this. But on page 12, you'll see is the Getting Started page. Again, creating a vision and goals, being clear about what y'all want to do, what y'all want to see happen with your bailout, what you want this to look like. Again, it will inform the next steps. Mapping out if there's organizing happening around bail. This is also important because this will also inform your bailout plan, because if there is already some sort of like reforms happening in your area, that will definitely impact what your intervention plan will be. It also will help you identify individuals and organizations that could be potential allies and collaborators with you for the bailout. We have mapped out supportive service organizations and providers. We recognize while doing a bailout that, paying actual bail was not the only part of the work, but it was also holding our folks that needed to be held. So we definitely suggest for folks to identify community-based supportive service providers in your areas in case y'all may need them. And then reach out. And so that's from reaching out to the folks that we just named, supportive service providers and other potential allies, to folks that you think might want to throw down and join a bailout team. Another part is create a plan, as you'll see on page 13, where I'm telling y'all to make a plan and make a plan and make a plan. It's hella important to do that. And on page 14, you'll see research and feasibility. This is what I was speaking about before. When we speak about feasibility, we are talking specifically about how feasible it is to execute the vision and the plan that you and your team have created. And your feasibility will be contingent upon numerous factors. Again, like how bail operates in your local city, and how your capacity as organizers and all these other different things. So just like really paying attention to doing your research, doing your feasibility, and just reaching out to different folks who can help you with that process. And we've named public defenders, community bail funds, private attorneys, community org, and other folks who may know something about the bail system and can really support in this work. The next is the action or homecoming. So we've seen with the bailouts, it's been really beautiful to welcome the people that we bailed out home with the celebration. And we have seen people do that from hosting barbecues and dinners and brunches and also having little goodie bags of like toiletries. So definitely think it's a really dope idea to have an action homecoming for folks. And then again, the follow-up and supportive services. We have seen that we need to hold our folks after we bail them out. And this can look like from just offering a ride back to wherever folks are going, to court reminders, to long-term housing. But definitely want to state that not everybody needs like extensive supportive services, right? But just wanted to make sure that that's in place. And then I'm just going to basically go back to the research and feasibility. And this being such a big key area will also help inform all the other steps on the research and feasibility. And it also helps you understand if like you want to do the actual bailout or you want to like hold different pieces of this bailout, such as like doing a homecoming, offering supportive services, because we recognize that is very important to this, to having a successful bailout as well. And now, and then communications, being able to get the word out to folks, creating press releases, publicizing the bailouts, creating talking points, like that's very important to this process. And then also fundraising, getting the funds to do all the brilliant work that y'all have planned on doing for the bailout. So this is the bailout plan that we have laid out for folks, and we hope it is helpful. And now I'm going to pass it back to Mary to speak about the bailout day.
Dude, here we go. I don't know why I always start talking and still be on mute. Get it together, Hooks. Alrighty, friends. So it's the big day. You wake up, you think you're gonna barf because you're nervous, but it's okay. You totally got it, you and your crew. And so the day of the bailout, I think it's, I remember waking up that day and we were like, oh my gosh, there's so much that we have to do. But we had organized ourselves into work groups. So there was a crew of us that were identifying people to bail out. There are several ways that people do this. Some folks, they know, a few days in advance, and just kind of banking that on the fact that some folks may still be in there by the time the bailout day happens, or people, will do bailouts at the point of intervention at the courthouse as folks are there getting their hearing, or at the jail, just going up and finding out who's there. Either way, you have to work with community members, partners, public defenders, social workers that are working in the jail. Sometimes in smaller, one of the places we did a bailout, our folks was actually working with a jailer and someone who worked inside of the jail. And so, our allies come in interesting places. So pulling on all of the resources to identify who's in there. And making sure you have a team that will be able to support folks, be able to keep the family in the loop, right? To make sure that folks can be there when they get released, or so folks can just be aware when they're coming home. But yeah, going to need a team to be taking care of all of that. Paying the bail. So it's interesting how much we learned about, one, banks don't always have a lot of money. So if you are in a situation, because there's going to be several forms of payment that folks do or don't take, it can be real stick, they like, yo, you only can have exact change, no bills over XYZ, only money orders. But be prepared to know that in advance, depending on how you raise money in the way you may have to get money out of the bank. For instance, some banks didn't have enough money and don't keep it on hand. And so we learned that we had to call and give some a heads up, at least 48 hours or so. Just be like, hey, if I had to withdraw a certain amount, is it cool? Y'all got that on deck? And you also make sure that who's ever the obligator, the person who's going to be signing for the bill, or the persons that are going to be actually signing, making sure you have whatever proper identification that they're requiring. Sometimes you can find that online, or better yet, just go up there and ask, or a phone call. But either way, just go up there to be sure. Even when we bail folk out here in Fulton County, one of our, we forgot to let folks know about the dress code, and we were kind of taken off guard. So be prepared, because sometimes you can't even enter without having the right outfits on, the right gear. So one of the coolest things that I appreciate about the bailout is being able to, so many people offered in-kind donations to be able to, have gifts for folks when they came out. So, we had it all spread out, we had food, people brought food, almost around the clock. Like I don't believe we ran out of anything. And some org had United Way had given a bunch of like lunch bags and all sort of treats. We had Lucy cigarettes and whatever one could need when coming out of the jail. And that was really a good way to make sure our folks just didn't like get bailed out and then like, oh snap, ain't nobody around. But, really wanted to make sure that it felt like folks were being welcome home and knew that, they had a support waiting for them. The press, that's something to be mindful of, depending on how press responds to this action where you're located. We made sure that folks that were bailing out and families and stuff knew, the press might be out here. We're gonna make sure they don't rush you, but let folks know. Obviously, you don't have to talk to the press if you don't want to. If you do, like, that's your choice. But we wanted to make sure that we didn't have the press all up in people's faces as they were coming out, and respecting people's privacy. But also, many folks that came out was also like, oh no, people need to know what's going on in here, and was ready and willing to talk. So, people, making sure people know that they have options. And the establishing a support network is going to be crucial. So when we had folks doing in-reach, right? And social workers and case managers doing in-reach. So went into the jails the night before or the morning of, and actually sat and spoke with the person and had like a form that case managers use to ask critical questions so we can make sure we have the support in place for people. And then as people got out, we had those same case managers and a few others that were there to make sure folks had what they needed. And we exchanged contact information and made sure that we, begin to wrap around that person and the others that we bailed out to be able to provide the support that folks are going to need. So building those relationships right away, because some people came out like, who the hell is y'all? And very surprised that, we actually were bailed them out the way we said we were. And then the days after the bailout, you got to turn up. You got to turn up, as we've said, a homecoming. And, again, as Rissa said, that can look like many things, right? Here we, piled up in the park and had a good old time. Other folks had a big old cake and met in churches. I mean, there is no right or wrong way to eat a Reese, nor is there a right or wrong way to have a homecoming celebration. We wanted to create an atmosphere where families could jam out. And I think because there were so many ways that folks could plug into this action, that there are several ways in which people can get involved. So this was a whole working group. We had a whole crew that was like, y'all on celebration, and have been working on that. And afterwards, we wanted to make sure people understood what was, the political imperative for doing these bailouts. We're trying to make sure folks understood that this was connected to a larger issue to end money bail and mass incarceration, right? And so, we did like a few weeks after we did the Transformative bail curriculum, ran that. We had done it maybe a month or two before. So we had done it a few times to make sure folks were able to check it out. But you could do a documentary screening, as the toolkit suggests, of the Khalif Broader documentary. Very powerful. If you're like, yo, I ain't got a projector, churches be having projectors nowadays. And some public libraries or colleges will rent out stuff like that too. So if you don't have access to that right away, somebody who got a little car or go to college might be able to hook you up. Follow up with the press and media. People, like, this moved a lot of people, and especially in this right now, the national conversation around bail is really a hot issue because a lot of folks been moving work around it. And so you know, you got to follow with the press and media that may have come out. Oftentimes they want to hear stories, they want to talk to folks who have been released. So let them know, the folks who we bail out, like, yo, if you're down to talk to the media, let me know. And, you know, take some time, talk to folks so that they feel comfortable with like what they were involved in terms of the action, and let them know like you ain't got to tell your case and all of that, but prep folks to be able to speak to the media, create some basic talking points. You know, this is a good time to lay your demands. If you're like, we finna kick off a campaign, it's a great time to start, lay your demand on the table. And then keep those contacts, because those are going to be helpful as you begin moving the policy stuff. And put in place the plan you created with the social services and the support, to make sure folks get back to court, get what they need to get back to court, and then addressing some of the other immediate needs, you know, whether it's housing, transportation, you know, trying to get the kids back, whatever the case may be. Yeah. And, you know, I think one of the main things is, yeah, should I stop there? I'll stop there. Boom.
I don't know if people are trying to talk, but we can't hear you.
Oh, there we go. One more thing about support services. We just want to make sure that folks know that the support services is not a game. Do not sleep on the support services. It was really dope to be able to do this action, and we were not being naive or underestimated what our people needed. I think what we underestimated was how malnourished the social safety net is for our people, you know, and what we thought, like, you know, folks just need to get connected to services. Even when we connect to folks to services, oftentimes those who are providing direct services didn't have nothing to offer. And so, you know, we had to get creative in a lot of ways and support folks as they figured out how we figured out housing. Charlotte, they couldn't get you couldn't get housing unless you had to prove that you were homeless for 2 years in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so critical social services needs were not being able to be met through, you know, the traditional means. And so having a case manager, someone for song, this is the way we did it. We got case managers to support folks for 90 days afterwards, and creating stabilization plans. And then we were able to use monies that was fundraised through the bailouts in order to be able to provide those sort of services. Others, you know, organized other organizations. I believe Texas, there were some folks who got churches to support and like take people under their wings to be able to make sure folks got on their feet. And, you know, it's an H, buddy. She keeps forgetting what H is. So yeah, but the support services, I would say, that is like a key priority to make sure our folks are going to be okay. And so, yeah, hopefully the tips in the toolkit will help you. I would recommend thinking about graduate programs, social work programs, just, you know, seeing who might be in other, your fraternities, sororities, whatever, who come with that skill set, because it is a skill set and expertise, honey. But yeah, making sure that we have folks in place that can have our folks back, yeah, to help them get back on their feet.
Yeah, this Pastor Glasgow, let me say this. We've been doing support services going 18 years, 17 going on 18 years now. Marbury and them are down here now, so they see the way we got everything set up for all the classes and everything they need. Eventually, everything that Mary is saying is very good, but eventually all the caseworkers and all that y'all will be paying for and all that now, eventually all that's going to fall off. You can simply do an assessment form and have people in place setting it up like therapeutic communities, or setting it up like safe communities, what we call it, liberation centers and all that, to where the people pretty much could develop a governing of themselves. once they go through the classes and all that. That's a little bit further on down the road for those of you that's just starting into supportive services and getting your feet wet into it and all that. Yeah, I can understand all of that, what you do, but after a while, you won't need all the necessities that she just pointed out. They'll fade off. You would need them to start, Mary, and Mary is correct, but you will not need them after you have got established in doing supportive services, I could guarantee you.
Awesome. Check. Erica, you want to hit us with some frequently asked questions?
Yep. Can y'all hear me now?
Yep.
No. Yep. Word. Dope. Okay. Hey, y'all. Super excited to talk about frequently asked questions and excited to be inviting folks into Bailout. So for folks who have the toolkit, we start with the frequently asked questions on page 28. And what we wanted to do is help people think through what we mean when we talk about money bail and immigration bond, and also help folks prep for conversations they're going to have with their team and with the media as you talk about your campaign, and invite your people to join you in the campaign. So we got some questions on how many people are impacted by bail. We got some questions on why we are doing Bailout, so you can talk to the folks you're organizing with, and you can talk to the media, letting them know everything that Mary mentioned around it being like an intervention and it being a tactic. We have some questions around like what we are doing and who we're bailing out. So we talk about Black people, why we say Black people, and then we have some more questions on like what is the intervention and what are the impacts of money bail. So you can got some facts and some data to support what you say when you're talking to community members. And then additionally, we have some around how we talk about the violent, nonviolent charges, that seems to come up quite a bit, and how to like maneuver through that conversation in a way that does not throw our people under the bus and does not compromise our politics. We also want to talk about the alternatives to the for-profit bail industry. And so understanding that the bail industry is definitely one of the targets, and how we maneuver that conversation. So I hope that you'll look very closely through pages 28 through 34 to see how you talk about these things, and also educate yourself on what's up. So that's all I got. I'll pass it back to Marbury.
Dope. I think next up is Scott, who's going to talk us a bit through the fundraising communication section of the toolkit. Scott, you there?
I am here. Come up on the video now. Good evening, everybody. I'm Scott Roberts. I am the Senior Director of Criminal Justice Campaigns at Color of Change. And at Color of Change, we have been supporting the bailouts through support on the communications and digital fundraising fronts. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of the importance and of having a plan for communications if you're doing a bailout, and some tips in terms of fundraising and as well as communication. So just want to start with pointing out that, you know, within the toolkit, you'll find starting around page, starting around page 55, the communications section begins. You'll also find a ton of resources in the appendix. So I highly recommend, first of all, if anybody's going to do a bailout, definitely, you know, take the time to go through the toolkit in full. Some really amazing, you know, organizers work to build out this toolkit from the time that we really started with Mama's Day Bailout to now. And I think it's one of the most important things you can do in terms of preparing to communicate about what you're doing, because I think by reading the toolkit, taking in the messaging over and over in different forms and different formats is a great way to just start internalizing the way that we've been talking about these bailouts, and you know, would hope that other folks would replicate. So I highly recommend going through both, the full thing, the full toolkit, and then checking out the resources in the appendix, where you'll see things like sample press release and sample fundraising emails, things of that nature that you can then customize, for your bailout. But in section 55, we really wanted to emphasize the importance of focusing on communications. It's really critical for the bailouts to have the intended effect. It requires for folks to know about them, because we're both making an intervention at the individual level, supporting people getting out of jail, and we're also making a systemic intervention with the intention of ending money bail. The way that we do that is to build public demand that puts pressure on decision makers. So it's critical that we use this opportunity to talk publicly about the work that we're doing. Also, communications can be critical for pulling off your bailout, especially if you need to raise money. So remember, keeping that in mind, I think there are a few things that I would just want to talk about. First of all, just some of the critical messages that we're trying to get across, and I have also found have worked for us in both fundraising and communicating through social media, the press, et cetera. We always want to emphasize not only our goals of ending money bail, but when we're talking about bail, we want to emphasize the human cost, the way in which bail can cost people their homes, their lives, using individual stories of people like Sandra Bland and Khalif Browder. There may be examples in your community of people who've paid a high human cost because of bail and pretrial detention. And it's really important to be telling stories and talking about the connections. And the reason why we started this project around Mother's Day is because we wanted to talk about the cost to families, the need to reunite families. And we wanted to try to paint pictures for people of the folks who are inside and reframe them and help folks understand them as full people, and understand there's people who miss them, who need them. And that's critical. One of the things that we want to try and steer away from is talking about the people's worth in terms of who's deserving to be bailed out and who's not. So we don't try to get into a dichotomy around, certain people were innocent or were charged with something minor or things of that nature. And it's also really important to us to give it a really inclusive message. We're focused on the community that is most harmed by mass incarceration, the Black community, but within that community, we're talking about all Black people, women, men, queer folks, whoever, and we are not, we're not kind of drawing those lines around who's deserving or not, even though we may have themes around Mother's Day or Father's Day, things of that nature. So with that, and thinking about that, there are some critical parts of the story that you're telling about bail and your bailout. So just like any story, you have your kind of heroes, your antagonists, your plot twists, or your plot points. And so I just want to again emphasize that we really want to lift up the stories and the challenges overcome by people impacted by the system. So folks that are being bailed out or have been inside because of bail, their families, and remember to tell the story about the communities that are coming together around your bailout. So who are the people who've organized together? Who are the people who are giving contributions? And make sure that we're telling the story of a community effort rather than coming across as one or two people doing this type of work. And then with the antagonists, we really want to focus on the system, right? We want to change the system of money bail and pretrial detention. And so we may talk about folks with decision-making power as maybe folks that we think are target audiences when we want to make different decisions, like elected officials, legislators, judges, prosecutors. But we want to keep a focus on the systemic change that we want. And we want to ask those people to make the decisions that would make them a hero in this, effort to end money bail. And then, again, just try to think about the symbols that you want to convey, both in like images that you may want to use on social media and otherwise, people being united, coming together, conjuring images of families, community. And these are events that can help us do what we often do with protests and getting media attention on an issue, but we can do it from a place of generosity, love, embracing people. And I think it really, for us, it's really worked as a tool there. So just really quickly looking back at the toolkit, just want to talk about some of the things that are here and just emphasize the importance. Starting with social media, I think, the digital realm is where we've raised the most money in our efforts. And I think even in a lot of the local bail funds that have been successful in working with us have used digital media. One of the things I just want to emphasize is, in addition to all the points that are here, the most important thing is to start with your own network. So who are the people that you can get to share something on social media, to email their friends? And if you can start there, you can start kind of a snowball effect. So first thing about that, and then look at these, there's sample social media posts and things like that in here that can help you easily pull the kind of content together for the folks you want to share it with. Again, we talked about some of the images. You'll see here how a lot of these images convey the kind of spirit of the bailouts, like we want to do. And then finally, in thinking about media, I think Mary actually gave a lot of dope media points earlier. I would just encourage folks to, again, think about storytelling. If you can find the facts and numbers about bail where you're from, that's great. But think about the story. If you can't say anything else to press that you're convinced is compelling, what's always going to be compelling is if you think on this. Why did you personally decide to do this? If you can have a personal story about that you can tell, as well as like how the process has felt along the way, challenges, highs and lows, I think you'll always be able to give a solid interview, and just focusing on that. Then finally, fundraising. There's a lot of great fundraising tools here. Again, I encourage folks to really think about how you can push this out through your own networks on social media. There's a sample email in the appendix that you can take and cultivate for your own petition. But you want to give yourself time as well. So when you're thinking about fundraising, have a plan, well ahead of your event, and think about what you need to hit those goals. But there's, I think, some other great ways that folks have done. Folks have things outside the digital realm that folks have done around fundraising, street canvassing. There's a great toolkit in the appendix by Southerners on New Ground, the organization that Mary is from, that lays out some great tips on putting together fundraising house parties. Really great events, I think, if you are trying to raise money like within your community, but also build community and organize people around the need to end money bail and the bailout in the process. So again, I'm going to cough here, and because I know we want to leave some space for folks to ask questions, but just remember that in doing this, we're storytelling. We're making an intervention in the way that people think about people who are incarcerated pre-trial. And remember to put an emphasis on having a communications plan going in, even as you're doing your bailout. And I'm happy to continue talking about it in the Q&A.
Dope. Thank you so much, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
So real quick, the next section we're going to talk about briefly is the policy section. We're also going to have May Hooks and Ruben from Philly talk a bit about the amazing work that's happening locally that these bailouts have been part and parcel of. So I'm going to keep it real quick. The policy section starts on page 71 of the toolkit. As Mary and Arissa both mentioned, the Mama's Day bailouts and the bailouts that happen throughout the summer and fall were really a tactic in what is a broader strategy to, number one, end the use of money bail and pretrial detention, but ultimately to end the criminalization of Black folks, Black bodies, and Black communities, and therefore end kind of the the mass criminalization system that we find ourselves in. And so there was a real clear agenda, I think, for all of the groups going in, that these bailouts were both an important intervention in the lives and conditions of our people, but also were meant to make a statement and to push a policy demand around how we actually reduce our reliance on cages and start to build what Mary said is the malnourished social safety net, which is actually what our folks who are in crisis really need. And so coming out of that, a group of over 20 organizations came up with a set of policy priorities, which you'll find in the toolkit. Those include things around reducing the number of folks who are held pre-trial, around taking money that's now being used to fund these cages, these courts, and these jails, and moving that money away from those cages to communities for the needs that we have that are most urgent. So that's everything from mental health support to housing. A huge percentage of the folks who we brought home and who came home didn't have a place to go home to. And so the reality of folks being houseless. And also a move away from risk assessments, from this idea that somehow your past involvement with this system dictates what a risk you are, and instead ask questions about what folks actually need to thrive inside of this system. We also talked a lot about least restrictive conditions, of not using ankle monitors that actually create jails out of people's homes, but instead using text message services that are shown to get folks back to court at the same rates as ankle monitors. So to think about other ways that are not restrictive, that are not limiting liberty, but are bringing folks back. We also talk a lot in that section about the need for more holistic reforms. And so we need not only new speedy trial laws, increased funding for public defenders, but also conditions. We spent a lot of today here in Alabama talking to folks about how they can't get tissues or pads when they're locked up in the women's jail here. And so what does it mean to be pushing for condition changes as we try to empty out the jails? We also talked about, and this is a huge one, on the end of profiteering, that what we're seeing in the bail fights across the country is that in place of using money bail, the same companies that are jailing and caging off folks and making profit at the federal and the state level are now intervening in the pretrial services arena and developing drug treatment, in quotes, programs, developing ankle monitor programs. They're now finding new ways to profit. And so how do we actually get profiteering out of our system in a meaningful way is one of the kind of key priorities. The reason why we came up with this list of both priorities and threats that you'll find in the toolkit is because we're seeing bail reform happen across the country, often in our names, but without our leadership and without our intervention. So we're seeing the rise of profiteering, the rise of electronic monitoring and other very invasive systems that recriminalize our people. We're seeing an increase in pretrial probation and pretrial retainment for folks who break very, very strict and unrealistic rules. We're seeing increased surveillance, and we're also seeing a real reliance on risk assessment that's putting our people back in, but saying that it's done because of a data-driven process. And so hope you all check out this section that really talks about some of the threats that we see and some of the ways that we think we can intervene. This section also lays out how bail reform can happen. And so as folks may know, bail reform is a local issue, it's a state issue, it's a federal issue. There are interventions at every kind of point of that ladder to reduce the pretrial population. And so everything from DAs that Ruben will talk about can be targets to reduce how often they ask for money bail. Judges are another very important target. They set lots of the rules and sometimes the bail schedule. City councils, like the ones in New Orleans, can limit the ability to detain folks for municipal offenses, which in many counties is the number one leading thing that folks are incarcerated for. And so wherever you stand, whatever relationships you have, whatever power you can leverage, there's probably a way to make some interventions. And so we welcome folks to that section to look through kind of what the possibilities are and to think about how do you have a campaign that actually moves us towards decarceration and starts to build, as Mary was talking about, the kind of social safety net that can hold off folks when they don't have homes and are being criminalized, that can hold off folks who maybe are in addiction crises. So with that overview, I'm going to pass it off actually to Mary Hooks again to talk a bit about the work in Atlanta and how they've been using the bailouts to catalyze real reform bail.
So it's interesting, this political moment that we've been in here in Atlanta. Some of you may be watching from afar. Many ATL folks on here, give us a shout out in this chat box. But there's been what I think has shifted the temperature here in the city is that we just came out of a mayoral race, and we have a mayor named Keisha. That's cool. But Keisha also does not have her life all the way on track when it comes to what it means to end money bail. And so one of the promises that she made as she was fighting for the progressive vote was that she would end money bail. And many folks rallied around her. So that's one of the things to help make that happen, or else the white Republican woman was going to win. But that's the whole thing. But then, so that's a condition. Then we also have the Southern Center for Human Rights and the Civil Rights crew. What is the name of the organization, Jesus? Alec and the crew.
Civil Rights Corps.
Huh? Civil Rights Corps. There we go. Thank you, y'all. They also were threatening a lawsuit because we know the way money bail is being handled. Money bail in itself is unconstitutional, and so they've threatened lawsuit. And Keisha Lance also, Lance Bottoms and Numeric also got that threat. And so I think what we, after doing the first bailout, there was so much momentum. However, I don't think we really galvanized it in a way that we could have here, because we were like, oh snap, we bailed out 26 people that first bailout. So we're like, oh snap, we got to make sure our folks are good, and a lot of our capacities weren't there. But it certainly ignited a conversation here locally in just a different way. And so over the last few weeks, literally, the mayor was like, oh, we're talking bail reform. And we were kind of scrambling, like, we need the ordinance, because they actually wrote one, and it was really, really bad. And so one of the things that I think has been helpful last year, and as we see more money bail campaigns and fights are brought to bear, we're seeing many different model ordinances that can be used to help, bring forth proposed legislation that can give folks a basis of the type of policy that we're looking to have passed. And one of the things I think we know that what got passed in Atlanta was maybe, it certainly did include everything that we wanted to see, for sure. We have yet to fight around the divest, invest, and making sure that money is that's saved once people are no longer in cages, since they don't have money, the money that's saved, that gets divested into a community-based line, a budget line that's for community and is controlled by community, to be able to get our folks what they need. And also, just a warning, y'all, the bail bonds company, the shade, it's really tough. They literally had someone, as they were voting, they paid formerly incarcerated Black men to testify and say, if you pass, I was a career criminal, if you pass this legislation, I'm just gonna go back into a life of crime, since y'all don't really care about crime anymore. And those sort of narratives. It was despicable. But even in that, we out-organized them, and we treated it like a rapid response moment, even though we should have been prepared differently, I think, for that moment. So we felt like we were in a little bit of rapid response, but we did out-organize them, mobilized our folks at City Council, were able to make some interventions where they were drawing the lines around violent and nonviolent. We're able to make some interventions there. But even for those offenses that they deem still necessary to get potential money allocated, a money bail allocated to them, they have to consider a person's income and put it on the record that they have assessed. They have assessed a bail that that's affordable. So. Yeah, it's on the Atlanta City's website. We'd love to jam out more with folks about it, but I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I think Ruben's also on the line to share a bit about the Philly experience around bail, and how folks have leveraged both the DA and the City Council around that. Ruben, are you on?
Sorry about that. Trying to get my son some food. He's over there whining. So just
Are you good?
Yeah. Just really quick. So we started the ending cash bail process about 3 years ago. We moved into the Mama's bailout last May, which really kind of kicked our movement into high overdrive because it attracted a lot of attention. And all of a sudden, politicians got a little bit more interested. So from May to last, Wednesday or Thursday, we've had city council come on board with 2 city council persons have introduced legislation. They passed a resolution a couple of weeks ago, about two to 3 weeks ago, and our mayor, like Krasner, introduced his form of in the cash bail by, making a public press conference stating that they wouldn't pursue, they wouldn't request bail for 25 cases, all misdemeanors, but as part of phase 1 of his rollout of not requesting cash bail. We just met with the MacArthur team this morning. For those you don't know, Philadelphia received the $3 million grant from the MacArthur Foundation to reduce the prison population by 34% over 3 years. So they're in the second year currently, about to move into the third year. And we would challenge them on some of their numbers and what their process is for getting to that end goal of closing at least one of the county jails by reducing the population. So they agreed to speed up their early bail review process, which currently sits at 5 days. We're hoping to get it down to 3 or less, but they agreed to move it up 1 or 2. So it'll be from 4 to 3 days before the person is exposed to this early bail review process. So those are some of the positives that are happening in Philadelphia right now in terms of the bail review. I think we have a lot of momentum with our coalition and putting public pressure on the powers that be. We're also about to engage in our extremely visible and forceful process to close one of the county jails. You guys may have heard of Close the Rikers campaign in New York, with Just Leadership kind of leading the charge. So we're going to be partnering with them and some other national partners to bring some attention to our desire to close the Creek, the House of Corrections in Philadelphia. So that's where we are. We're fortunate enough to get a couple pieces of policy on the table, namely one from City Council and the second one from the District Attorney's Office, 2 major plans. We also got a concession from our bail office, in which we can now, so all the bails that we paid so far, we bailed out over 35 people. We bailed out 9 people tomorrow as part of our Black Love bailout. We'll be doing some more in March. But we haven't had a revolving fund, so we kind of worked on an honest system with folks and have them sign like a promissory note to return the money. But we recently, within the last 2 weeks, worked out an agreement with our bail office in which now we can actually have the money returned directly to us, so we can rotate those funds as those cases are completed through the process. So that's kind of an update on where we are. We are participating in the Black Love bailout. Like I said, we're bailing out 9 people tomorrow. And then we have some more people who will be in the pipeline for March. So that's pretty much where we are policy-wise. So I don't know, any questions?
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Ruben. And I think what we're going to do at the end is open it up for folks to ask either the panelist questions or anyone questions, and we'll share some info details if folks want it. I'm going to really quickly just go over kind of how folks can get plugged in and involved. I know that it's 7:58, and then we have some dope folks talking about the Black Love bailouts, as Ruben just mentioned, that are happening across the country in the next few weeks and last week too. So real quick, if you are interested in doing a bailout, if you want to learn more, if you want to download the toolkit, if you want to hear more about it, go to nomoremoneybail.org, and that's where you will find the link to download the toolkit, as well as a survey folks can sign up for if you want to actually be in direct contact with the folks for TA assistance. So again, that's nomoremoneybail.org. Secondly, if you're interested or have questions about a bailout you're planning, you have the toolkit, but you're like, yo, what does this mean? Feel free to email us at the National Black Bailout at Gmail. So again, nationalblackbailout at gmail.com. if you have any kind of one-on-one questions you want to ask. And also, once folks download the toolkit, you'll get an email that will invite you to also fill out a survey. We'll be setting up calls for the 40+ folks already who are thinking about doing bailouts either for Mama's Day or a different event, to provide some technical support and just put us all in community with each other. Also, if you want to support the bailouts that are already happening and want to donate, also check out our website, nomoremoneybail.org, to make a donation to the folks who are doing this dope work. There also is an entire section in the toolkit on solidarity actions. So if you like, yo, I don't know if I got time to do all this, or I don't know if I have the team, but I would love to throw a house party or do some canvassing, or do a political education kind of thing. There's a whole section that will kind of break through those possibilities for you, so that we can all, do what we can. So I'm gonna stop there. We'll send a follow-up email and invite folks to join us, either via the website or via the survey, but there'll be a follow-up for those folks. And I'm gonna pass it now to some of the dope folks who are doing Black Love Bailouts to just talk a bit for 3 or 4 minutes each about the work they're doing this month and how it's going. So I'm gonna start with Baji, Ben from Baji, to talk a bit about the bailouts that they're planning. On mute.
Hey, sorry about that. I realized I was on mute, but can folks hear me now?
Yep,
you can hear me now? Okay,
Yes.
cool. Yeah, so I wanted to kind of touch on immigration bond and kind of what the work has been around that. And one of the things people I think we want to folks keep in mind is that, there's some distinct differences between immigration bond and the criminal bail system. And really, especially the main part of it is that judges really have little discretion around giving someone a bond hearing. And so the kind of 1996 IRA law basically means that just about any criminal contact means that you're not eligible for bond. So which means you can be indefinitely detained. So there won't be a bond hearing for you. You'll just be detained and held in jail for as long as your case, whether you're fighting a case, whether you're in removal proceedings, whatever the case or situation may be. And this is really pertinent right now as we do this campaign because of some of you have heard of the recent Supreme Court decision, which the Trump administration kind of following up and supporting what Obama was doing. They recently won a case basically saying that people who are asylum seekers or who are permanent residents do not have a right to a bond hearing, which basically means if you don't have a bond hearing, it means that you can be indefinitely detained, which really kind of makes the work that we're doing difficult. People don't have a bond hearing, they won't get bond, and then we can't bond them out. And so this is particularly important for Black people because Black immigrants have some of the highest levels of already criminal detention and deportation, but also asylum seekers. Around 35% of asylum seekers every year or accepted asylum applications are Black people, particularly African immigrants and folks from the Caribbean. And so this immigration bond fight is critical for us. Black immigrants not only face some of the most difficult aspects of the immigration bond system, but are going to be particularly damaged by this particular administration that continues this long legacy of anti-immigrant policies that impacts Black people in unique ways. So we'll be participating in the Mama's Bailout. We'll be focusing on immigration bond. We're excited to be part of this collective, and we hope that you all continue to join and strengthen this fight.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ben. So next we're going to have Pastor Glasgow, who is on the line, I know, to share a bit about the bailouts happening here in Alabama. Are you on mute, Pastor Glasgow?
Yes, I'm here. So
Beautiful.
what's happening here? So what's happening here in Alabama? as I alluded to earlier, we got the whole service component used to doing that. I want to say once again, and I will say it continuously, thank God for y'all in this national bailout. That put it in a whole different perspective. Now, because of the bailout that we did down here with the Mother's Day and all, we got one city that have started amnesty court. And what that means is people that got bails in city court in Dothan that couldn't pay their bills and all, they got court days set up for them to just do amnesty, meaning that they could come to court and they could get exempt or amnesty for not being able to pay their bills and all, and get another court date and set up a time to do a payout, so to speak. So that's happening here, and we're going to do it in some of the larger cities like Montgomery and everywhere. Montgomery and Mobile and all will follow suit. The other thing that's happening here is that we are working now on our county, because down here they just seem to be taking people's money. They don't give a goddamn who you is. The debtor's prison is common down here. And, like I was telling Marbury and them earlier, they know the rules. They just don't care. They see, they're arrogant enough to believe that no one can ever do anything about them. That's the first thing. Second thing, and the third thing that happened to me with the external voters' rights. They knew that they was unconstitutionally taking people's voting rights, but they didn't care because no one challenges it here. So now with the bailout, the other good thing that's happening is now we done put it on everybody's agenda on the candidates that's running for office. So that's one of the biggest things that we have done, and we wish that y'all will follow suit everywhere. We have told all the candidates, how do you feel about bail and this and that and the other for indigent people and all. So they, because of our influence in that political spectrum, of course, they are putting it on their program, their platform, and their agenda, and speaking that message for us. So one of the things I do want us to do is to get a clear message on what we want them to be saying. So they'll be saying what we want about it exactly the way we want it toward the policy. So those, when y'all were speaking of policies earlier, that is the time we are at now to where we need to really be talking to these candidates about policy. But other than that, we're doing good. We've been doing service support for the longest. It has increased a little bit, I would say, because of our work and carrying this out. And now with us being on the other side, actually being able to do the bails have really gave us some notice statewide. And what I mean by that is pardons and parole. So it affected pardons and parole in such a way of us doing the bailout that pardons and parole now is not using Life Tech. Life Tech is a prison they had set up to do substance abuse and supportive services for those who were in prison. Now they are actually sending us those people because of the attention we got with the bailout and all that. So everybody need to clap their hands and thank God for that. So we really influenced from Alabama, the lower part of Georgia on this west end, and the northern part of Florida.
Hands clap. Thank you so much, Pastor Glasgow. We're doing all the things, all the things. Dope. So I'm going to pass it off to Erica from Memphis to round out the report backs. And then we're going to open it up for about 10 or 15 minutes from questions from y'all, which you can either put in the chat box or you can voice. But I'm going to have Erica go first.
So thank you, Margaret. I'm with the official Black Lives Matter Memphis chapter in Memphis. We were super excited to start our Black Love Bailouts locally and launch the Memphis Community Bail Fund. And so last year, after we did the Mama's Bailout, we got with Just City and Men's South Peace and Justice Center, which are two local organizations, to come together to model our vision of what a collective community supported services could look like outside of pretrial detention and money bail. And I think it's important to name that our Black Love Bailouts and our bail fund are all in service to our efforts to end money bail. So we both want to raise awareness around the inhumanity that is pretrial detention, and also use our bailouts as leverage to move city council and our county commission to move forward with local bail reform. And so we're super excited to be throwing down in February and March around the Black Love bailouts. And then we'll continue with our Memphis Community Bail Fund to practice on participatory defense, to work with community members to fight their cases, and to create like strong supportive services models and push our local city council and county commission to divest from jails and pre-trial detention and invest in our community. So super excited to be throwing down in that way.
Dope. Thank you so much, Erica. And thank you for everyone both who has just been engaged in this labor of love for the last year or so, and for everyone on the call who took the time on their Tuesday night to get down with us. So we have about 10 or 15 minutes for folks to ask questions. Again, folks can either unmute themselves or can put questions in the chat box. Does anyone have questions they wanna throw out to either the panelists or someone else on the call, or just generally? Great. So Desiree just asked in the chat box, how did you guys come together, identify each other's strengths, and streamline the organizational goals on a micro and macro scale? I don't know if Mary or Rissa, one of y'all want to take this?
Well, I'm gonna answer it. Maybe Arista, you can answer it from a national context. I'll say from just a local context. The local coalition that we pulled together here in Atlanta, we just put a broad ask out there to organizations that we knew had an interest in, based on the constituents that they served, organized with. So we've just rolled out, with them in the past. And we had an idea as to what the working groups we needed already, and made direct asks from some organizations like, yo, we know y'all know how to do XYZ, come through and hook it up for this thing. Or just, loaded folks in based on what the needs of movement was, and hopefully that skills would transfer in order to get the work done. So yeah, on a micro level, I would say in a local context, I think we got a sense of what all that needed to be done, and was clear around what were some of the asks that we needed to make so folks could get involved. So there were many entry points into the work. Some organizations, were able to kind of select, where they saw their skills were. Don't want to get marked on your face.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, and I think, like, as mentioned earlier, like, we, as organizers came together to, like, speak about just the bail system and the pretrial detention system. And then from there, Mary offered up this action to bail out Black mamas and caregivers, and folks were like, dope, we commit to that. And folks were coming from just different places in organizing, different interests. I work at the National Bail Fund Network, so have experience with working with different bail funds and bailout formations. So I was like, okay, I think I know a thing or two about bail and like what the questions that we need to ask. So like a big role for me was like technical assistance and like having folks figure out like what makes sense in like research and feasibility. And I think we just all like collectively were just figuring out where our strengths lie. And we pretty much moved from there. And as Mary spoke to like the local component, because we do consist of local groups and organizations, folks were able to build out like their teams based on their local needs and their local vision and goals. And we just went from there.
Dope. Thank you so much, y'all. So there's one more question in the chat box, and then we can open it up to other folks. The question is, how do we decide who to influence? I'm in Delaware County, PA, working to deprive the only private prison in PA and the bail bond service in the courts. How do you suggest we influence the courts? to remove cash bail. I don't know if folks have thoughts. I mean, the first thing I would say is just a power mapping of who is it in the county who controls the bail schedule and who is it who makes decisions about that, and then based on that, kind of work backwards. But I don't know, Mary or other folks who have done local campaigns, or maybe Ruben and Philly, if y'all have thoughts about how to determine a strategy and who it is that folks should be targeting.
Hey, Mara, just flagging that Ruben replied in the chat. He might have the best.
Oh, look at you, Ruben. You responded.
Yeah, no, what's funny is this is a testament to how important it is for us to like link and work, because I actually know Tanita, and I didn't know that she was doing this bail work in Delaware County, which is right down the road from us. Different county, but right down the road from us. So,
I messaged you, Ruben, but anyway.
What happened?
I did message you, but I guess you didn't get it.
Oh, I probably did. But what's interesting is I think that we could support each other and link the kind of resource that you're looking for. So I don't know a lot about the process in Delaware County, but I'm sure it's not that different from what we're dealing with in Philadelphia. So I think that we should sit down over a cup of coffee to figure out how we can kind of link the two groups. All right? Cool?
Sounds good.
I mean,
problem solved.
Yeah, I'll put my deciding who to influence and who can make the decision, and all the other folks, the secondary targets, I'm sure Ruben then will probably like, boom, 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 get off to this cat. If you wanted some creative ideas, possibly around ways to influence, happy to talk about that. You know what I mean? I have to put up pressure.
So thank you so much, Mary. Do other folks have any comments on that question, just around like how to decide who the target is, aside from power mapping, connect with Ruben, and be thinking through kind of who you have influence over? Nope. Dope. So the next question is from Emma. And this is really around they're working in Maine to eliminate money bail. And one of the challenges they're facing is what Scott described around this distinction between deserving and non-deserving, or violent and non-violent. And it feels like the most realistic shot right now is to eliminate money bail for some offenses as a starting point. How can we do that without making a really problematic distinction? Do folks have any tips? I know that Mary, y'all just went through this in Atlanta. If you want to talk a bit about that.
Yeah. What? These little snakes here in Atlanta, they were literally trying to put that panhandling was part of the violent offenses, right? So there's like this. We're like, what? They're like aggressive panhandling. Like people come up to my car and my wife and they get, like some of this protect the women and children type narrative, right? And so, we had to, that was something to look out for, like how people are just criminalizing poor people, like they panhandling because they poor. Then you're going to say that's considered violent. So then they can't be, they'll be still considered possible bail. Yeah, it's all, you know what I mean? So like how they're criminalizing the poor, I think is something quarterly. Just give me a moment, baby girl. It's something to be mindful of. There's even around animals, and like animals being also part of that. So I think Atlanta, it's interesting to see the domestic violence, was a big conversation as well. And so what we were saying was that there should also be some pretrial service options that included mediation, where people didn't have to, where families and different ones can find other ways to, mitigate and get repair for the harm that may have been caused. But it shouldn't just be like, that's the end all be all. And so, yeah, I think, we've been trying to navigate those and bring more nuance to those conversations. But I think it's something that we have to continue to push back against at every turn, and not be like, our people don't harm each other, but we also like, ain't nobody been charged or nothing. So slow your roll. We're not judge and jury. That's not y'all's branch. That's for a judge to decide. And people have to get their due process. And so let's start that conversation first. Let's go there first and making sure we keep that as number one. Innocent till proven guilty.
Thank you so much, man.
Can I just
go ahead.
Sorry, I was weighing just from a communications perspective. I think one of the realities that really actually brought us together was that the more we're bringing this crisis to light through the bailouts and all the other campaigns and tactics people are using around the country, the more politicians are doing what they typically do, which is try to come up with a quick solution, make people feel like they did something, right? And sometimes that something can be a positive thing. Like we've seen progress, like Mary's talking about Atlanta, like some of the things that have happened in Philadelphia, right, where it's going to have an actual impact on people's lives, right? Some people who would have been in jail will not be, hopefully, right? And at the same time, so sometimes we don't necessarily want to block that. Like we don't want to, rage against the, kind of pragmatic move forward, or we may not even be able to stop it if we wanted to, right? Being realistic. I think what's important for us is the posture we take in talking about it then. Like we can both not block something, but also be clear that we're staying on our line, right? That we're clear about what we want. And even as some progress passes, I mean, Ruben and them literally just did this week with last week with bail reform from the district attorney, which is a huge victory, but also just is not the whole thing, right? And I think I was just reading your statement last night, Ruben, and it just goes line by line telling you this is progress, this is a result of people organizing. It's always important to claim that and then say we're not finished, we want more. So we never want people to, I think the main thing that happens is when that pragmatic change happens, we don't want people to think we won and it's over. We want to give people that next call to action. So this is a really good question. And just from a Tom's perspective, that's how I think it's important to think about it too.
Dope. Thank you for that, Scott. Two quick things I would say. Just number one is around this communication thing, but also the language we use. I think it's been really amazing to watch both in Philly and Atlanta, then like using terms that humanize our people or that refuse to dehumanize them. And so not talking about violent offenders, not talking about, but like really using language like our mothers and our sisters and our brothers who are accused of crimes. And so I think even when we don't get the win we want, that we can start to change how people are talking about us and about our communities, that is like actually like a really important long-term strategic thing. I also would say there's a list of questions that critical resistance contributed to at least all conversation that's in the toolkit around, even if you're not getting the victory you want, is this a victory that in fact makes due process more difficult for some people? Is this a step that actually increases funding to punitive agencies? And so I think asking yourself what you'll support or won't support isn't about if there are things we have to compromise on, but also about naming what you won't compromise on, right? And to being really clear that if this is a piece of legislation that in fact entrenches folks or denies due process, that like coming out against that is important, right? And so being able to make incremental steps, but also not lose some of the kind of key principles that actually make it harder for us to win in the long run or change the battlefield in a meaningful way. Do folks have any other additional comments about that question or any other questions that folks want to ask before we say farewell?
This is Karen Garrison from Washington, D.C. I'm Mommy Activist and Sons radio show, and I'm on the call, and I'm really pleased with all the information that I'm hearing so that I am a vehicle of communication for people, links and resources. This is something Sunday I'll make sure that I highlight. I do something called the tour bus, sightseeing tour bus, where I tell people this is your homework, and your site and your information will be what I'll put out. I wish there were more people that I knew had responded when I sent them this information, but I will make sure that I put it out. The main thing I'm so impressed about is the toolkit, because the toolkit has everything. I mean, you didn't leave anything out there. If someone like me wanted to start and give support in certain areas, it tells you just how to do it. So I appreciate it so much. And Kenny always doing such, good things in Alabama and everything. Not surprised, but this is something great. And that bail. I went to a thing before about bail with NACDL about 2 years ago, and they had a judge there. Just an example of saying that she put the bail so high. There was a man that had to spend 6 months in jail because she made his bail $2,500 when she could have made it a nickel. He was homeless. Somebody could have paid, and he could have came out. So that's one of the things I think about when I see bailout, that people don't need to be held over just for a bond. And I'll be glad when this is cleared up. And I will be working. Anybody want to send me some information, I'll put it out and do the best I can with it. But thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. And definitely do let us know your email address so we can share with you what's going on. So there was one
I
more.
sure.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying thank you.
Oh, dope. There was one more question around how folks can stay informed about the developments around bail and the work that we're doing, which I'm going to pass to Scott, who is our comms maven.
This last
Oh, the
question.
question was about how folks can stay informed.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I can hardly stay informed. One of my biggest regrets already of the years, I couldn't keep up with what was happening in Atlanta to help out or try to get involved with and help there. So there's a lot of things moving with bail. I definitely encourage people to look locally. It can be as simple as searching your city in bail reform, and you might find the organization that's working on it. And so I definitely encourage, people to think about that. Same thing for your state. There's lots of people who are trying to move it in your state. Nationally, it's because the issue is at the state and local level. It's very hard to track everything that's moving, so I can't point to one source. Certainly at Color Change, we run a number of campaigns around bail reform, and you go to our website and sign up, and you will definitely get a lot of updates around bail and other issues. But yeah, I think what's been said here is if folks sign up with National Bailout, if you got this email, that means you'll get future communication from us. But we're trying to cultivate our social media as more of a clearinghouse for that type of information. But I would say all of the organizations here, SONG, Law for Black Lives, No 215 Jail Coalition in Philly, some other, I'm not sure who else I would suggest the folks follow, but they're, I don't know how to otherwise how to stay in touch. But I just suggest that folks try to find the local organization. If you just do nothing else but follow them on Facebook, you'll at least probably see some things happening.
Dope. Thank you so much, Scott. Do other folks have, Mary, is that you pointing?
Mm-hmm.
Do it.
Yeah, I just saw Desiree's question around how long does it take to get from training to implementation. And I'm sorry, the background, my kid wilding out on me. But I just want to say, when all of us did this, we didn't know what we were doing. We never done this before. People, you bail out folk, I done got bailed out before, you know what I mean? Like have done it in that way, but to enter it in this way is different. And so the action didn't require us to be experts. It just required us to take risk and required us to ask for help, you know what I mean? And to use, just our instinct as well. So I think that starting it is where it's at, and getting the crew together. Anybody who's down, we always we also always say we try to bring together the team of the willing and the folks that are willing to take collective risks in order to have collective rewards. So you may not feel like an expert, but you don't need to. It's totally cool, but you should certainly feel like a risk taker.
Yeah, this is around the time last year that we decided to do this together. So it's definitely doable. We didn't have a toolkit or anything. So yeah, just emphasize what Mary was saying. We can, it's like, this is not as hard as it looks.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that. That's how, I'll go ahead, Ivissa. I was going to drop the ball.
Oh no, I was gonna say the same thing, and like it definitely differs like where you are and everything else, but like the best experience is actually trying it, like bailing someone out, like even if it's one person, and seeing like, okay, this is how it works, like this is what we know we need to do. Just doing like a test run will definitely be helpful for folks, and then that will inform like your larger plan as well.
Absolutely. So go do it. If folks need any support or help and we can do that, would love to provide it. So shoot us an email or sign up. But sending love and appreciation to everyone who hopped on the call and to the incredible warriors of love who have thrown down to really create and make the Toolkit possible. So thank y'all, and we'll be in touch, and sending everyone love.
Say good night. Say good night, Porter. Say
Good
bye.
night, Porter.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
It's in her chest.
Bye, y'all.
Good night, y'all.